Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode.
Alright, hello guys. So today we are talking all about weights for hikers. And specifically we're going to be talking about how you can go about finding the right weight for you. Now this podcast is inspired by a question I get pretty much every single week from some type of hiker. And as you probably know from listening to this podcast, I'm a massive fan of the benefits of strength training for hikers. And essentially, when I talk about this, I often get the question from a hiker, I'm doing this exercise, what weight should I be using? And the problem with this question, or the problem with giving a clear answer to this question, is there's no right or wrong answer. Because everyone is different. Everyone's got different levels of strength. And for me to sort of say, okay, you should be doing 10 kilos on this exercise, or you should be doing 20 kilos on this exercise, it just doesn't translate because everyone's at a different stage. And essentially what we need to do is find the right weight for you. So this question, it doesn't really work. Now, what I typically say with trying to find the right weight for you while you're training is I like to look at weights training and choosing resistance through a lens of what's known as reps in reserve. So essentially there's a few different approaches to choosing your weights. Some people will go out and just choose any old weight and just push that and be like, all right, happy days, that's done. Some people will go out and choose the weight that they can literally do at the very limit of the repetitions they're trying to do. So what I mean by that is if they need to do 10 repetitions, they choose a weight which they can literally only ever get 10, and it's a real struggle towards the end and they get to that absolute limit. And that could work for some people. But what I prefer to do is do something that's called reps in reserve. And essentially what that means is you're choosing an exercise and choosing a weight for that exercise where you can do all the prescribed repetitions, but actually you're going to finish with a couple of reps in your back pocket. So if you really needed, you could actually do a couple of reps more, but you finish before that. So for example, what I like to recommend my hikers is using 2 reps in reserve. So if I prescribe 10 repetitions, then what I want them to do is find a weight where if they really absolutely needed, they could do 12 or even 13 repetitions if they push themselves to the absolute limit. But instead of doing that, they only do the 10. So they always have that 2 to 3 reps in reserve, 2 to 3 reps they could get out. Now, this may be a little bit strange to some people because all through our training lives, all through social media, all through anything that's people talking about fitness, people always say, you got to push it. You really got to get, push yourself to limits. You got to work hard, no pain, no gain and all that jazz. But the beautiful thing with this is we can get incredibly strong without ever getting to that point of absolute having nothing left in the tank. And even if we're always keeping this 2 to 3 reps in reserve, we can get a huge amount of progress over time as long as we follow smart programming and as long as we're consistent with our training. So essentially for my hikers, I actually get them to do about 95% of their strength training like this, where they never really reach that failure point. They've always got those 2 to 3 reps in reserve, and that really does serve them very well. And the benefit of this is we can keep on improving their strength, but also it reduces all that, quite a bit of the muscle soreness. It reduces quite a bit of the fatigue compared to when we're pushing to the absolute limit. And it can make training much more achievable when we are actually having a bit of a lower energy day. When we know we're actually not going the limit on these days, we can walk into our sessions and feel much more positive. And I think that's a big benefit when it comes down to it. And then from there, back to my original question of what weight should I be using? I basically tell my hikers, you just want to use trial and error here. And you just want to play around with different weights and see what happens. Some people might pick up a weight and they might be like, okay, perfect, I've hit that. I've got my 10 repetitions and I've still got 2 reps in reserve, happy days. They might do a set and they'll be like, what, actually that was too light. So the next set you just try more. Then they might do a set and it might just be too heavy. So the next set they try less. And it's just trial and error again and again and again, because there's never one right answer for how much weight should I be lifting. It really comes down to personal situation. Personal situation in your strength, personal situation in your energy for the day, personal situation for, how much concentration you can bring into this session, and a whole bunch of different factors. So it is really all about trial and error. So if you are looking at your strength training and you are wondering, okay, what types of weights should I be using? My best recommendation is for the majority of your strength training, trying to do that 2 to 3 repetitions in reserve and just do trial and error until you find the right weights. It might not sound super, super scientific or super, super precise, but in all honesty, I find that is the best way. And then before I wrap up, some people might be saying, okay, that's 95% of the time. What about the other 5%? And in that sort of situations, when we're doing exercises where we really, really want to get a big leg burn, doing things like, high repetition, bodyweight squats or high repetition step ups or whatever, in those situations, we may go to the absolute limit. But for 95%, stick to that reps in reserve, do the trial and error, and I really do think it will serve you well. So thank you so much for listening today. Short, sharp episode, but I hope you got a bit out of it. Have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.
You've been listening to the Training for Trekking podcast. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us in iTunes. So thanks for getting involved, and we'll see you on the next one.